All right, everybody, welcome to the Getting Outdoors podcast number 239. And I got my dear friend, Miss Kate Donaldson. She is probably my most frequent guest I've ever had on my podcast. But, Kate, we always got something to talk about that interests everybody.
We do. I mean, who doesn't like talking about the outdoors and fishing in the state of Alabama and all the great things that our state has to offer?
Well, you're about to go. Well, we'll get into that later. 10 years you've been with the ABT. 10 years, this is your 10th year. And what I want to talk about on today's podcast, I'm calling this outdoor recreation economics. And
Mhm.
I got so many questions to ask you. You've been doing an awful lot of traveling here lately, and most of your presentations where you're traveling to is on outdoor recreation economics. Let's start out by talking about this Jacksonville State independent study that you shared with us a week or two ago, and just explain these numbers to us.
I think it's important for people like the Alabama Bass Trail to have studies like this done. Lisa and Tail recommended that we do this. As everything, legislature is always changing. Different representatives, different senators have different platforms that they like to support, and you always need to stay in front of them to let them know that fishing is a viable industry in our state. And so we felt like 10 years was a good time to sit back and kind of do one of these studies. We did one in 2021 and to give an overall picture of what the Alabama Bass Trail has done for the state of Alabama. But one of the things that I mentioned, you and I talked off air, I mentioned in a conference that I spoke at a couple weeks ago is this is a snapshot of the Alabama Bass Trail. As we know, we have two elite events next year. We have an open event next year. We've had an open event this year. There's the Sylacauga Marine Trail, there's the Airport Marine Trail. There are other organizations that are contributing to the state of Alabama economics, not just the Alabama Bass Trail. So this is very specific to us, but we are one of many that contribute to the state of Alabama. And I think that that's important for the legislature to know that fishing is a viable industry in our state and it is a generator for economic development. So, it was very important to me to have this study done. I'm glad that Lisa and Tail suggested it and actually helped us with the funding of this because, one thing we heard last week or at the Coosa Alabama River Improvement Association is everything starts with data and you have to be able to support your case for things like that. So Jacksonville State, Jennifer Green, Jeff Huey took care of this study for us. They worked on it for about 6 months for us to have this study. And so I was excited to see the numbers and just understand that they took surveys from anglers throughout the year. So we asked them on average of what they spent in an Alabama Bass Trail tournament. What did they spend on housing? What did they spend on food? What did they spend on fuel? What did they spend on shopping? What did they spend in other fishing related expenditures? And then we took the entry fees and made that separate. So anyone who fishes will tell you entry fees is a very small portion of what they spend when they actually go bass fishing. So very important that we look at all of those factors. And so this is a very comprehensive study of the numbers. And again, it's objective and subjective. These guys, they do financial work for a living, so they are not in the trenches of bass fishing every day. So they get a very clear picture of what it looks like economically. What some of the things that I found, we'll just talk about the first numbers that we showed the other day. And that graphic, I'm going to turn to it in my paper here just so I can see it. So total tournament activity. This is from 2014 through 2023. Tournament activity generated $72.5 million for the state of Alabama. So when you then look at that and you take into consideration the tournament and ABT expenses, that's what it took us to buy all of our equipment. That's all the TV time that we've bought. That's all of the payroll that we've paid to all of our guys that's worked for us. It's all the advertising we've spent, everything else like that. That's an additional $14.7 million. I think that's a number most people can't understand because they're used to thinking of it on a small time tournament basis. But when you consider all of the expenses, and some people don't understand this, we have about $35,000 a year we spend in hotel expense, $40,000 in taking our trailers from here to there and everywhere. So we have a tremendous amount of expenses each year that is outside of just base payroll, workman's comp insurance, different, corporate policy insurances. We buy gas. We do all that gas expense for the Alabama Bass Roll is a little over $14,000 a year. So when you think of all the expenses over the 10-year period, that's about $14.7 million. And how did they get these numbers? We turned our budgets over to them. Here's our budgets. We operate on a very strict system. Feeling we're a nonprofit organization, we feel like we should work on a very strict process. So we turn our budgets over to them. That's where they know where our expenses are. And then when you turn around and you look at the payout, $6.4 million paid out in Alabama Bass Trail cash payouts. And then you look at sponsor prizes and cash payouts, an additional $563,250 for a total economic impact of $94.2 million over the first 10 years. So that's an incredible number. And I think a lot of people probably look at that, oh, that's so far-fetched. But when you sit down and look at from 2014, and I looked at this number on back here in our study, and I'll send this whole study to you, Big Daddy, so you have it. Angler spending went from $943.69 per tournament to $1,290.51 in 2023. So that is a huge jump. And we knew that. I mean, inflation and then just the cost of travel, gas, hotel expense, all of that was going to rise. So that is outside of their entry fees as well. So we've seen a tremendous growth in expenses just simply because of outside factors. But it is really it's good to see. I wish prices would go down. I'll be real honest with you. I'd like to see inflation reduce, and hopefully we'll see that in the upcoming time frame. But very interesting numbers. Overwhelmingly, the large majority of spending is spent with lodging. This is outside of your boat cost, your insurance cost, and all of that. Just your trip cost. Lodging is about 30%. Food is about 18.5%. Fuel is another 23%. Shopping is 12%. And then fishing supplies, bait and tackle stores is about 15%. So those are the numbers that Jacksonville State came up with. And again, that's where we are in 2023 with current spending. So that is it's real exciting. Alabama Bass Trail, with the expenditures that we have, supported about 690 jobs in Alabama with the spending and the taxes that were generated from spending in the Alabama Bass Trail in 2023.
And let's remind everybody once again that those numbers are just for the Alabama Bass Trail for the past 10 years and the Alabama Bass 100, Trail 100. But how many 30 boat tournaments we have every weekend, how many 50 boat tournaments we have every weekend, a club tournaments, and those probably add up to more than the Alabama Bass Trail statewide, wouldn't you say?
I would say statewide, certainly they would. I was going to look at a number here. If a Alabama Bass Trail tournament generates $300,000, which in here it's a lot more than that. It's around $450,000, but I'm going to use round numbers. And you have a 4% sales tax in your community. That's an additional $12,000 from one event that's going to go into your general fund in your city from a 4% sales tax. So I don't know, a town the size of Camden, $12,000 additional sales tax is substantial. And it's going to be more depending on where you go, because every city is set up differently as far as how much tax they collect and all of that. So On a $300,000 economic impact, you're looking at about $12,000 in sales tax that's going to be returned to your general fund.
And
And
Kate,
that's encouraging.
and that those numbers, I'm going to ask you this, and I don't know how you do it, but how does somebody like me or somebody in a community that's trying to explain to our leadership, how do you communicate those numbers to the leadership where they understand it? That's a problem I've always had.
Well, I think the one thing that you can do is with your city council, especially, is they get financial reports. I mean, they see their sales and lodging tax reports. Is to layer that over your calendar. What was going on when you saw a spike in sales tax? If you look from, I guarantee you, if you go look June of 2022 as opposed to your June of 2023, you should see a significant increase in your sales tax, your alcohol tax, and all of that because Alabama Bastro 100 was there in June. So you would just want to layer that over your calendar, and especially any big events that you have like that. A tourism organization really wants to track that so that they can go to the city council and say, you know, you funded events like this in the past. We're asking you to fund this event because in the past you've seen a spike of $12,000 in sales tax. Yes, you're going to pay $5,000 for this event, or you're going to pay, you know, but even if I'm paying $5,000 for the event, if I'm making 12 back, and again, $12,000 is conservative. I still think our events are running about a $450,000 economic impact. You're still making $7,000 in the wash. So I think cities have to do that. And I think that's the easiest way to break that down. Um, Also, you know, we teach our people in tourism to look at their tax expenditures. And I don't have the state tourism report in front of me, but to look at their expenditures and divide that by the number of people in your community. And that gives you an idea of how much cheaper you got to live in your community because these guys are paying taxes and going home. You're not having to pay them services. You're not having to give them trash collection. You're not having to give them, you know, wastewater and all the things. So it is a good way to look at that. But that's what I would do, is just to take your calendar of events and take your financial report from the city, and they should be able to see the benefit of when events come to the area. Now, every city is going to have expenses. You're going to have to keep the grass mowed. You're going to have to keep, you know, general stuff done, and you take that in consideration too. But if the event is a successful event, which I feel most of these events are, and I'm not just speaking from an Alabama Bass Trail perspective. I've seen bass come in and have tremendous impact on different communities. I've seen the Bass Nation come in, the high school tournaments come in and have huge numbers. So I'm just trying to show that, yes, this is a small, even though I feel like those numbers are great and I feel like we've made huge strides, we are one part of the pizza. We are one part of the pie. There are so many other things that play into that. So we are, and what people need to understand and take a lot of pride in is we are a mover and shaker in the tourism industry and in economic development in the state of Alabama for sure.
Ain't no doubt about it. And next weekend, we're recording this podcast October the 9th. No, what is today? The
Yeah.
10th, October the 10th. And the 21st, the city of Demopolis, who has invested a great deal in a wonderful facility, has got the Alabama Bass Nation High School coming.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think they even realize what they finna see. Tell them what they finna see when those guys roll in on the 21st.
You know, high school tournaments are just so different. They bring a lot of people with them. They bring little tent communities with them, and they set up and they cheer their kids on. Very similar to what you would see if you went to a baseball game or a football game. The community really rallies around that. The fishing community does. The schools do, and I think they're going to see a lot of people in town for that event. I think that's really good. Tickle for the city of Demopolis and the state and Alabama Power for doing everything that they've done to develop that ramp. They are going to see that become an economic engine for that city. I just encourage them to really, really take care of that facility, you know, and make sure that they promote it in a way that's going to create economic development. Yes, it's there for the citizens to use as well, and we always need to bear that in mind. But it needs to be a revenue generator. And I think the city of Demopolis has done a great job. I know Alabama Power did a lot of work on that. Freddie Padilla it has been very instrumental in that area down there. So they're going to have, they're going to see a whole new side of the fishing industry. That's for sure.
All right, Kay, you've been doing a lot of traveling here lately. You went and spoke at the Coosa, Alabama River Improvement Association annual convention, and also you just got back from the Sports Fishing Summit.
Mm-hmm.
Where was that at?
It was in Destin, Florida. They rotate that. The company, American Sportfish, is actually housed in Washington, D.C. They are really a big advocacy group that has a lot of governmental affairs people that work there. They're on the Hill in Washington a lot. There are several things that are affecting the fishing industry that may not be freshwater right now, but they stand ready and have all of the data. They invest a ton of money in market trends. They give this report to members. It's about a $2,000 report that they give to members for our membership. And it was really interesting to me. It really highlighted a lot of things industry specific that sometimes I get so wrapped up in the tourism numbers, I don't really look at the industry specifics. But when you look at almost $8.1 billion spent on fishing tackle in 2022, $8.1 billion spent
And
on.
that's nationwide, right?
That's nationwide. And that's important because those sales tax dollars are how our grants are derived out of Washington. So the money that we get to build boat ramps and parking lots and piers and all those things come from this sales tax that's generated through tackle sales. So it was real interesting to see that, and how fly fishing, they keep that separate as opposed to general freshwater fishing. They keep saltwater separate. One thing that I love is I try to predict how people do things and how people shop. And one of the things that stood out to me more than anything in this report was 81% of anglers still buy their tackle locally. They buy them in brick and mortar stores. 10% buy online, and then the other 9% say other. So that's encouraging when you're talking to an academy or to, a tackle trap or tackle box or whoever, is that 81% of freshwater fishing anglers still purchase locally in a brick and mortar store. So that was real interesting to me. And it was very similar on the saltwater side as well. But American Sport Fishing, they are in Washington. They're currently fighting two issues. One is the lead ban in some of the states that are trying to ban lead lures, lead tackle, hooks, things like that. So they're battling that in Washington, and then they're also battling the right whale situation on the eastern coast, on the East Coast, taking the speed limit to 10 knots, 100 miles out. So it's not something that affects me, but I'm glad they're there fighting that fight, because as we know, it could always be in our backyard the next time. There could be something in Washington that affects freshwater fishing. And then if it affects one of our states, eventually it's going to get to, maybe to our state. We've seen that with the Asian carp. At first, Alabama was left out of the Asian carp bill, where we did not receive any funds to help fight Asian carp. So this organization went to bat for Alabama, as well as some of our congressmen, and were able to get Alabama in the second bill. So a lot of things that go on from a national stage will eventually affect the state of Alabama. So very, very good conference and great data. They use Southwick Associates to do all their studies, and they're very entrenched in the fishing and marine industry.
Now, as a speaker, and they ask you to speak at both of these events, give us just a Cliff Notes version of what you present to those people. Because it's some movers and shakers you was talking to at those meetings.
Well, from the Coosa, Alabama River Improvement Association, I think the importance is just to really drive home the importance of recreation. And in areas like Camden and areas like Demopolis, that is not considered an industrial place, and it's not, you don't have a lot of industry that's going to drive economics. You've got to look at non-traditional forms of that, and recreation, angling, recreational boating. All of those things are important. So when you're looking at development of boat ramps, when you're looking at the development, dredging and the things that you guys are really involved with right now on the Alabama River, those things are important, working with the Corps of Engineers. So really driving home the message as far as Coosa, Alabama goes, is the importance of recreational fishing, recreational boating, and things like that, and what it means to small towns. And that's how the Alabama Bass Trail was created, was to go into bedroom communities and create economic impact and basically be the Super Bowl for that area. And so that's really why I was there. As I went to ASA, the reason I was at ASA, and I totally was so surprised at how my role there changed over the course of the week, was to show that we have a large female presence in the fishing industry. But also when I got on some of the marketing committees and got on some of the media and PR committees, really understanding how we can integrate the state agencies and how the tourism industry is really not looked at from these groups. But yet we have a very large voice. And so being able to incorporate the tourism community in the retail, because this is very heavy retail manufacturers. That's what this organization was started for. It was actually started as a manufacturers association and has broadened its base. So it was really to be able to bring those two areas together, but also to help with action plans. And we're more grassroots. And you had a lot of people there from BASS. You had some people there from MLF. And then you had the Alabama Bass Trail. So it was very interesting to be in the room with all of those brilliant minds, from conservation to marketing to media PR, and strategy. It was really a unique thing. I'm very glad I went. I was actually supposed to go last year and had to have some surgery and miss the conference. But it was a really, really good conference. And you're right, there were a lot of movers and shakers. This book is listed with tons of people that I did not know, but luckily I met several of those this week. Very good conference.
In case any of you don't know, when Kay Donaldson walks in a room, it's just like a light bulb shining. I can tell you that people know she's in a room. I guarantee you.
Well, there were a lot of really um, very smart people and very passionate people. I get this when I go to the governor's conference on tourism, how passionate the people are. You go to ICAST and it really is just busy, 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 busy. You're running, you're probably putting 20,000 steps a day, in at ICAST. This was a very intimate setting that you really got to hear people's passion, and to grow the sport and to look at different cultures and how that affects our industry, across racial divides and cultural divides, and from the standpoint of, are we translating our data into Spanish, or all the different languages, and how all of that really does affect people's willingness to get into our industry. So it was a great conversation, and I look forward to staying involved in that organization. Hopefully they'll keep me around.
I'm glad you're there. All right, let's go back to the Coosa, Alabama River Improvement Association meeting. I have been promoting this group for a couple of years now, ever since Blake contacted me. You and Blake, what a team you two make. But some of the issues that we have on the Alabama Coosa River is, you mentioned a while ago, the dredging, and something that came up, I understand, at this last convention, a meeting, an annual, whatever you want to call it, was stocking public lakes. And that is something that every tournament I go to, and I'm sure you do too, people talk to you about it. I remember when Mark's Outdoors, he used to have that huge tournament. They used to give out a bag of fish, but it's always been a controversy there with the sports fishermen, the anglers, and the wildlife and freshwater fisheries. They just don't think alike. What are your thoughts on that? Did you learn anything about that?
You know, we did, and I will say this. It's fishermen and biologists. I don't think we ever see eye to eye on things, but I do think that there is room for negotiation and compromise. that people from American Sport Fish, which is a different company than the conference I just went to, they made a very good presentation. They have recently started working with the state of Tennessee on doing some stocking there. I think the important thing to understand, and I've mentioned this on my podcast a couple of times, is it's not just stocking. It is enhancing the resource and making sure that we have good habitat there. You can't just release thousands of fingerlings at the boat ramp and expect that they're going to survive. So I think being strategic about that. I did speak with another gentleman at the American Sportfish Conference that talked about stocking as well. You don't stock for numbers. That's the thing that I think anglers need to understand is you don't stock so that you have more fish in the lake. You stock for the genetics. And you need to stock good genetics so that when they do spawn, when they do mate, that you have strong genetics being passed down. One of the things that have been highlighted by our fisheries with the Marks Outdoors situation is always stocking F1 bass. So when an F1 and an F1 breed, or then you have a less genetics, because an F1 bass, and I may be misspeaking, but is a Florida bass and a northern bass bred. So once they breed over and over and over, now you're getting a third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh generation of that fish, and the vigor and the genetics are much weaker. So they do not grow as large. So Florida strain bass certainly are what we know to be the bigger bass. The northern bass, because we do have some cold weather, give us the bloodline that we can survive in the cooler weather up in North Alabama. So I think that's what people have to look at. I think there's room there for compromise. I don't know that we'll ever have that in our state, to be honest. I mean, I've went to Montgomery several times and pounded my fist on the podium for it. But I think what anglers need to understand, as I am saying that I think there's room for compromise on the Department of Conservation standpoint, I think there has to be room for compromise on the angler's side of things, that they've got to understand you're not stocking to have more numbers of fish. You're stocking to have the better genetics. So you want the bigger bass. You want, instead of a bass that's going to be 3 years old weighing 1.75 pounds or possibly 2 pounds, you want that fish to be at a 3 pound to 3.5 pound weight. And that all comes from genetics. You can tell even in individuals when we have different genetics. If you've got two parents that are 6'5", your odds of you having a child that's 5'1" is not very good. So it just goes along those lines. And I think anglers just have to understand that it is the stocking. There's a lot of things that go into that. Have we had flooding? Have we had a catastrophic event that went on like we saw on the Coosa River, in 17, 18, 19, 20? Honestly, at Lake Jordan last year for our championship, we had a 328 weighed in for big fish. To tell me we were going to go to Lake Jordan and not have a 4, 5, or 6 pound bass weighed in, I would have never believed that. But that tells me that we don't have a good recruitment class of that 4th, 5th, and 6th year class. So count backwards, that's 18, 19, 20, 21. So we need, where's the research as far as that goes? We had significant flooding during the spawning time. I'm not saying we lost a spawn, but we didn't have a good spawn. I mean, because they'll tell you we haven't lost any spawns. But when you look at that Coosa River and the flooding that we had, I mean, that's one reason why we had to move the tournament from Logan Martin to Miller's Ferries, because they had so much flooding, they couldn't complete the ramp in time. So you had significant flooding during those times. And I think we're seeing that now with the recruitments of the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th year class of fish for sure.
Well, communication, I think you said it. That's the key to everything.
Mm-hmm.
Now, another thing, you mentioned habitat, and that's what I hear from these fishermen on Miller's Ferry. Now, I'm just talking strictly about Miller's Ferry right now, because I don't know about any other lake, but the Corps of Engineers spraying program on Miller's Ferry, in my opinion, and a lot of the anglers' opinion, has a lot of room for improvement. I just don't understand what they're doing. I mean, if they are targeting a evasive species, how do you do that with a helicopter? And I just don't understand what they're doing. And I have never been able to communicate with them to find out. What is your experience with invasive spraying throughout the whole state of Alabama?
I mean, we have spraying all over the state of Alabama. We have it up here in North Alabama. If you rode across Lake Gunnersville right now and you rode up into the Scottsboro area, you're going to think we have no spraying going on. It has basically choked out a lot of the fishable area there. A lot of the hydrilla milfoil, you can't get boats back there. So that water's basically become unfishable. You have to understand that, I mean, there needs to be a balance. I don't know how they control spray by using helicopters if they're dropping pellets, but what I can say is I don't think that we're at a point to where chemicals only kill certain things. I mean, you're going to kill whatever you're spraying. But the other thing about it is, I don't think any company in the country has enough money to eradicate vegetation. I think we have the combination of chemicals and grass carp. We saw that happen at Lake Eufaula, that devastated some of the vegetation at that time. You also had a hurricane that came in and did a lot of damage to their vegetation. I think spraying around public boat ramps, spraying around fishing or swimming areas in certain areas, I think that's certainly stuff that you have to think about. They have to spray things that are not harmful to the public when they're spraying in those areas. But we have that in every, whether it's TVA, whether it's Alabama Power, or it's Corps of Engineers, we have that going on across the state. I don't really have a good idea of. I know they say that they're limited to 5,000 square feet or 5,000 whatever, 5,000 acres maybe as to what they can spray in a year. But I know that they also go back and replant vegetation on the banks so to keep from the erosion and the things like that. So it's a touchy subject. I mean, we deal with this up on the Tennessee Valley region. My husband works for TVA. He doesn't work in a capacity of an engineer or a biologist, but from the intakes that they have there at the nuclear plant and just the amount of eelgrass that they now have full-time employees, and that's all they do is clean the intakes from the eelgrass. And we see that, that being a big thing on them as well.
And I think that's a lot about what's going on down here. And I think it's they are not transparent with it. I think they are spraying mainly to keep that stuff out of the military powerhouse more than they are invasive species. And I don't know why they just don't say that. Why don't they just say that?
Yeah. Well, and two, as consumers, we need to understand that the higher cost of producing electricity is going to be passed on to us. So now that they have 24-hour round the clock people that are doing nothing but cleaning out those intakes, that is a additional cost of creating power that we're going to see as consumers later on down the road. I think there needs to be a good management plan. I think there is enough evidence that shows that grass habitation is good for fish. We know that over the years when lakes have been, here for 50 years, what is underneath the surface, the stumps, the trees, the shale beds, the railroad beds, and all the things that was flooded to make these lakes in 50 years is gone. I mean, it's just the way it rots. It goes back into the earth, and you don't have those stumps, and you don't have those rock piles, and you don't have those ditches and things, sediment. I mean, you guys are dealing with dredging and all that. All of those things change the ecosystem. It's not just one thing. So we need to all be mindful of that you can't just hang your hat on stocking. You can't just hang your hat on the grass spraying. It all kind of works together. Like I said, people in Scottsboro will tell you that we have no spraying because it is absolutely areas up there that you cannot get into. And they'll never, I mean, it's going to take something very strange for them to get those areas back, because Gunnersville is a lake that only goes down about 18 inches in the drawdown period, where in Decatur, we'll go down 7 feet. So by the time you go down 7 feet, same time of the year, you do eradicate some of the things that's under there, and you do lose some of that that ecosystem that's under there. Gunnersville that grass never gets out of the water. So it's not exposed to the elements. It doesn't freeze and die off. It's always in the water. And so it's always growing through photosynthesis and all the things. So it's a little different on Gunnersville than it is at Wheeler. Wheeler, Wilson, Pickwick, we see about a 5 to 7 foot drawdown every year. So we don't have the grass exposure that Gunnersville does. So what they need to do on Gunnersville is totally different than the maintenance that needs to be done on Wheeler, Pickwick, and Wilson. So you just can't paint every body of water with a broad stroke. So I think that's something anglers need to keep in mind, and I think it's something that the power companies and the people that are in charge of the maintenance of the lake need to keep in mind as well.
I agree. Kate Donaldson, golly, I'm so proud we got you in Alabama. Hey, let's let's talk a minute now. This is 10 years is gone. 2024 ends your tenure. You got your championship coming up. Talk about the championship a minute. Talk about just give us a 10 year history, brief history of what you've experienced in the last 10 years. Because I
Wow.
have seen every emotion that you have in the last 10 years.
It has really been quite the experience. When Governor Bentley asked me to do this, or when Lisa and Tail actually asked me to do this, um, I would have never ever dreamed that it would be what it is today. I really didn't even know what to think, to be honest with you. But I'm very proud of what we've been able to accomplish in Alabama. I'm even more proud that you see other states trying to emulate what we've done. Um, Other states that are very jealous of what we've been able to accomplish, and very envious of being able to do this. And not every state is geographically laid out to where we could do this. And then, when I think about the number of partners, one of the things that stood out to me in this report is 9,078 anglers from 19 states has fished with us, and that's incredible. And I know communities we go to don't have that many people, so that's the kind of things that really stand out in my mind. The amount of friendships that I've been able to develop, the amount of people that's been introduced to the state of Alabama through the Alabama Bass Trail, the number of people that have gotten out of their comfort zones and gone from Miller's Ferry over to Lay Lake that may not have ever gone there. It's been a really great 10 years. It's been a really tough 10 years. I've learned a lot. I've really gotten a lot of tough skin over the past 10 years. I've had to have some hard conversations with anglers. I've had to have hard conversations with Department of Conservation. I've had to have hard conversations with lots of people. It's been an education process the entire time. Lee Centel will tell you when we first started, he knew nothing about bass fishing or what it meant to the state. But now he's the one advocating for an economic impact study. He's the one advocating for the Alabama Bass Trail with the legislature. So it's been a very good 10 years. I'm really excited about what the future holds for the Alabama Bass Trail. I think we have a phenomenal board of directors that really appreciates what we're doing. I know the anglers in the state of Alabama. I always say this: I have 1,100 of the best outside salespeople a person could have, and I really appreciate their loyalty. Even people who don't fish with us now, if you see their comments that come up, I was on a TikTok live the other day, and Will Rigsby hasn't fished with me in probably 5 years, and said, "I've missed the Alabama Bass Trail. We so appreciate what you've done." People that don't fish with us that appreciate what's been accomplished through the efforts of the Alabama Bass Trail. And the only thing that I would really want to present to people is, yes, we run a tournament organization. Yes, we do the freshwater marketing for the state of Alabama, but we are really here advocating for other trails as well. I don't want to work 52 weekends a year. Fishermen want to fish 30 to 50 weekends a year. So we need lots of good fishing trails. And, so we want people to be able to fish all the time. We want you to sell more Phoenix boats. We want you to go eat more Jack's biscuits, buy more Garmin electronics, and we're just a small portion of that. And very thankful for being able to be handed this baton back in 2013, and hopefully, as people look back over the last 10 years, that they have something good they can say about what we've been able to do through the confines of the Alabama Bass Trail. It's been a really really good it's been a really, really good run. It's crazy the changes and the growth that we've seen.
Well, it's been under great leadership. Now let's talk about Wise Lake next weekend. The live, yeah, I tell you, the live changed everything for me with the Alabama Bass Trail. I can sit right here in the Alabama Grampian Hills and watch it, and I love to watch it. Y'all do such a great job at it.
You know, when you think about that, it started in COVID during 2020, and the need to stay relevant in the market because we had sponsors to support. And we took two iPads and ear pods, and we went out on the water and through a little, venue called V Live, was able to stream on iPads and earpods. And then the next year we went to the streaming backpacks, and we had a lot to work out with all of that. And Chris Brown and I really trying to figure all that out through Google and everything else. And I'll just give a little small story here. In 2022, the day before the championship, Scott came to me and said, "Hey, this was a little more than what I was expecting to be away from home, and I've made the decision to change jobs, and here's my resignation." That was tough on me because I knew that going in, and I tried to tell Scott that before I hired him, and I knew that it was going to be hard to be away from his family. And then 2 weeks later, I had had surgery, and 2 weeks later, Chris Brown calls me and says, "Hey, I need to let you know I've handed in my resignation for English Channel. I'll be leaving the last week of December." And I've lost my tournament director, and I've lost my everything director. He did my lives, he did my podcast, he did all the things. It was a tough a reckoning for Kay Donaldson. I felt like I didn't have another startup in me. I felt like I couldn't go forward. I felt like maybe I was the broken spoke, actually. So went through a lot of really soul searching, and did I have it in me to do this again? And it was tough. I'm not going to lie. November was probably one of the hardest months. November 2022 is probably one of the hardest months I'd faced. But I felt like I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. Was able to get John and Daniel on board. They both knew the tournament series. They just didn't know the logistics of it as far as the computer stuff. We got them up to speed. Got introduced to Vince Early and Herbie Strickland with WOTM out of Birmingham, and their live services. Got to meet with them. Felt very comfortable moving forward with them. And live has been tremendous. The quality of the live has been so much better since joining forces with WOTM. You can go back and look at our numbers on YouTube and see the difference. I want to say at Pickwick in 2022, we had 900 views on YouTube, and each one of our shows now is averaging about 6,000. So just the quality really comes through on live production. And so, it just says that when you are down and when you feel like you've been kicked and you can't get back up, and that's how I felt in November of 2022. Even though, and people say, "Oh, but you were sold out and you got 100 people on the waiting list, and you got all these sponsors, you got all this." All that's great until you don't have the support system around you to be successful. I say this all the time. No way Kay Donaldson does all this by herself. I do a lot. I'm the only full-time employee, but you come Saturday and you got those 10 guys out there doing the best customer service they can do. And you've got the live team that's over here that's killing it and putting cameras on and all the things. And, it really has been a family. And you say you need a village to raise a child. Well, I need a village to raise the Alabama Bass Trail. And at the time, I felt like I couldn't do it anymore. And I sat right in this very chair facing this very wall when my boss called me and I told her I didn't think I could do it anymore. I think it was time for me to hang it up and pass it on to somebody. She talked me through that. And I think we had probably one of the best years we've ever had on the Alabama Bass Trail, seeing significant growth. And just not just growth in numbers, but growth in confidence, growth in service. Not that we haven't had our issues, we have, but it has been probably one of the most life-changing years that I've gone through. Shortly after that, my son gets injured on January 9th, never had an injury, goes into surgery 8 days before my first event of the year. But I had a team behind me that was willing to just suck it up and do it. And it just made things just drive home that much more that I'm doing something I should be doing with the people I should be doing it with. So, it's been a long 10 years. And a lot of the scowl lines and the wrinkles have come from it, but I'm very proud of what we've accomplished. And I don't say that I do it the best it could be done. I just do it the best I know how to do it. And I'm tickled that the board has let me stay in this role for sure.
I'm tickled they have too. All right, now I can remember back when you first started, me and you had conversations almost daily. I'm talking about back in 2012 and 13. And one thing that you was having trouble doing was selling the Alabama Bass Trail to these different host cities. That don't happen no more. They calling you, want you to come. So
Yeah, that is a shoe on the other foot now. We have cities, especially on lakes, that have multiple cities that compete to have the Alabama Bass Trail there. And in the city that doesn't get us that time, I try to put something else there. I try to send some of my friends that have tournaments. Whether it be the Toyota Owners Tournament or whether it be a BFL that Alan Gray is in charge of, or Toyota Series or whatever. I try to stay in contact with all those guys because it's important to me for Alabama to stay full. Lee Centel, I'm not saying anything that Lee Centel wouldn't say, is he said at the 2013 Bassmaster Classic in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that Alabama has bass up to our ass. And my goal is that everybody know that, and that we keep these cities busy and we keep these cash registers ringing. So I am very blessed that people want to host us. And I hope that continues. I hope that they continue to see the benefit of the Alabama Bass Trail, and it'll make it an easy decision for them.
well, I said that to say this. I know how you struggle to pick your host cities every year. You set your schedule a year ahead of time. You set your dates a year ahead of time. You're the only person. Well, now you used to be the only person that do that. Now everybody waits on you to see when they're gonna set their date.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to ask this question every time I have you on here. Is Miller's Ferry in the future of the Alabama Bass Trail or the Alabama Bass Trail 100?
I think that you cannot think about the core mission of the Alabama Bass Trail without thinking about Miller's Ferry. I've said this on your podcast. I've said it on my podcast. I go to a lot of places, and I don't think I've ever been to a place that I felt more at home. To be so far away from my home, probably farther away from anywhere else we go, is Camden, Alabama. But a place that I feel the most at home, that I think our anglers are the most welcome, is when they come to Miller's Ferry. So I don't think you can think about the future of the Alabama Bass Trail without thinking about Camden and Miller's Ferry. So certainly you're always in my crosshairs. We have to think about something that is logistically good, that's good for your community, that is good for the Alabama Bass Trail and good for our anglers and good for our sponsors. So that's how we always approach things. If you've ever sat in with me on a planning thing, I operate. And it was interesting because they did the same thing at this conference I just went to. I look at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's SWOT, SWOT. And I look at those, and every year I try to evaluate what those are for our company, what those are as far as sponsorship goes, what those are as far as scheduling goes. I work with Bass. I send my schedule to MLF, in March. I send it to Eddie Clemens over at the Bass Nation. I've sent it to Airport Marine. I've sent it to Sylacauga Marine. I think I've actually sent it to Jeremy Bass at Pride of the South. My whole goal is to make sure that our anglers have everything in the world they can do to fish. And so, in doing that, I always look at opportunities, and Miller's Ferry always shows up in that column. And that's good. Of course, you got people over here that's talking to you about Demopolis, and you got people over here talking to you about Selma, and you got people over here. So, it certainly is a better fit for the 100 just simply because of the housing situation, but that's coming along with the Nelson's development and what they've been able to do. The McGraws have been able to do there at the cabins and campground there. And, we'll see what the state park's going to do there at Roland Cooper. So, that's coming along. It's not where it was 10 years ago when we started. It's way better than it was 10 years ago. So certainly Miller's Ferry and Camden's always on my radar.
Kay, I can't thank you enough. Every time I call you to be on a pod, I know how busy you are, and I appreciate you taking this hour. And we've been on about an hour now. Thank you so much for everything you do. No, you do not have a bigger fan in Alabama than old BDL. I promise you that.
Well, and you don't have a bigger fan in Alabama than Kay Donaldson. And, people, if I can just say, those early days were tough, and they were tough emotionally, and there were high highs and there were low lows, and you were there for all of those. And I really, really appreciate, I've told you this before, and I told my story down at the conference. I was raised by a single mom. My dad wasn't in my life at all. And when I meet people like you and Mr. Ken that I eat breakfast with every morning, I'm reassured that there are good men that are out there that are good, positive role models. And I sure appreciate all the times you answered the phone when I really needed a soft place to land and a place to cry at points. So I really appreciate that.
Well, I just look forward to the future. And I know 2024 is, I know you're already getting ready for 2024. I know you,
Yeah.
but good luck next week at the championship. I'll be watching it live. And once again, thank you for all you do. And thank you for taking time to be with us today.
Well, thank you so much. And I will be talking to you soon.
All right, darling.
Thank you.